The Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame has announced its eligible candidates for the class of 2025. There are some headliners. When I look at the men's side, you have Carmelo Anthony, Marc Gasol, Dwight Howard. Those guys have a strong chance of getting into the Hall of Fame for 2025. And you got Doc Rivers headlining it from the coaching perspective for the Hall of Fame. Him and Billy Donovan. So that's interesting. But then when I look through the list of seeing the other guys, they're not the main attention getters. I saw one guy I knew growing up. I watched at a young age from the time I was in late elementary school. I would say is Anthony Hardaway, also known as Penny Hardaway. He's on the list. And I thought about it just when I saw his name on the list. Is he a legit Hall of Famer? Well, first all I like to say is when he first entered the league, he had a lot of potential. You could just see that this guy was going to be a great player. But it was interesting because during I think it was the 1993 draft. Yes, it was. So that draft, Orlando Magic had like the number 1 pick in that draft, and the Warriors had the number 3 pick. Going into that draft, Chris Webber was the projected number 1 pick. He had the hype of being a generational talent, and everyone thought he was just a sure thing for greatness. He got all the hype. Penny was really an unknown, not someone that many people had paid close attention to in college. But when the draft rolled around, Orlando, they took a chance and decided to trade down to get him because Shaq requested it. Shaq wanted to play with a guy who could give him the ball and set him up for easy opportunities to score. He wanted a playmaker, kind of like how Jabbar had Magic. He wanted Penny to be his Magic type of player. No pun intended. So the Magic decided to take a chance. They listened to Shaq and they flipped Webber for Hardaway, which was very controversial because no one knew really who Penny Hardaway was back then. I remember just the hype of Webber that they even had Webber lottery fever shirts saying that on there for Magic fans back in the day. That's how big he was. There was just so much hype behind Chris Webber. So there was a lot of outrage and anger among Magic fans for trading the Webber pick to Golden State for Penny Hardaway. But that trade turned out to work really, really well for the Magic in the short term, looking back on it. So when Penny first entered the league, he started to turn out to be a very good player very quickly. Just in his first season with the Magic, he made the All-NBA rookie first team. Webber won Rookie of the Year as expected, but Penny showed a lot of promise. He was averaging, I think, let me see how much he averaged that year. I'm going to pull it up. It was 16 points, 6.6 assists, 2.3 steals, 46 overall from the field. So shooting 46 overall from the field back then was quite the achievement because defenses were so much better. It was very hard to be an efficient player in that era. So he was already showing that he could be something special from the first time he entered the league. And then he just took off during his second season. He became, I would say, a great player during his second season that quickly in his career. Usually guys, when they enter the league, they don't become great that quickly, but he did. He averaged 20.9 points per game, 7.2 assists, 1.7 steals, on 51% shooting from the field, 34 from 3. And he would have those type of numbers for like the next few years. That's how great he was. Penny was so great during that era that he was one of the few guys that gave Jordan problems on both ends of the court, that he was so quick, athletic, and lanky, and he had the height to bother Jordan, unlike a lot of guards during that era. So he was a matchup problem for Jordan. And during the 96 playoffs, there was a lot of questions about whether or not he was going to be the next guy to take Jordan's throne. Just when you think about it, well, I would say based off on what happened in 95 when his Orlando Magic, well, I would say Shaq's Orlando Magic and him took out the Chicago Bulls that previous year, there was some doubt that maybe Jordan had met his match. I remember just the press back then, because even during the regular season, Penny had this one game back during the Bulls 72 win season where he gave Jordan problems. I think he outplayed him, and he led the Magic to a victory in that game. And in that game where he won against the Bulls that year, Shaq wasn't playing. So there was just a lot of hype saying, like, maybe this guy's a challenger to the throne. This is Jordan's kryptonite. This guy could cause Michael problems. I just remember just all the commotion back then about it. And obviously the Bulls squashed that when they swept the Orlando Magic that year in 96 to get revenge a year later. But Jordan had a lot of respect for Penny, because I remember him saying Penny was one of those guys he was excited to play against, one of the few guys he felt could challenge him back then, and he looked forward to it. So that speaks volume of Penny's greatness. And I also remember just the hype about Penny back then. Just, it was ridiculous. I don't even think there's a player currently, a young player today currently, that has the type of hype that Penny had back then. Just the charisma, the commercials. He had a commercial with Tyra Banks back then, which was pretty big. Just the little Penny commercials. He was a very charismatic guy. He just had it all. Just the game was exciting. He had flair. Just, he could do it all on both ends of the court. He was great at just getting to the hoop and finishing, and also just an amazing playmaker. So those are things I really remember about him. And I thought he had like the best chemistry anybody's ever had with Shaq. I know people will bring up Kobe and Shaq, and were they a more powerful duo than Penny and Shaq? Yeah, they were. But I don't think their chemistry was on the same level as Shaq and Penny, because I think Penny always understood that Shaq was the guy in Orlando, and he always willingly took a backseat to that. He was always willing to do whatever it took to keep Shaq happy on the court. That he always passed it first to Shaq and then looked for his offense second after that. His game was more suitable for Shaq than Kobe. And on top of that, Penny could have been a guy getting 27, 30 points a game, but he dialed it back for Shaq, and he had no problems because he just liked winning. The main issue with those two back then was really Shaq's ego. Shaq was hurt by Penny's popularity. He was threatened by it, and that really bothered him, that the fans in Orlando loved Penny more than they loved him. And it was one of the many reasons Shaq left, other than Orlando trying to lowball him when it came to renegotiating a new contract for him when he was a free agent. But that was one of the big reasons why Shaq left, because he was jealous of Penny's fame, his popularity, and felt that his shine was starting to become bigger than Shaq's shine. And Shaq left to the Los Angeles Lakers. But I felt Shaq, if he could do it all over again, I think he would have stayed in Orlando, because with Penny, he didn't have drama on the court. There was just none of that. Not even in practice, from what I've heard or recall. There was just never any issues. The issues just came from stuff Shaq invented in his mind due to not being as popular as Penny at that moment in time, even though he was a better player. But Shaq admits even later on that was a mistake, that they had great chemistry and he screwed that up. So I definitely think if he could have done it again, he would have stayed there with Penny. And Penny doesn't get hurt, they could have possibly won a few titles. I wouldn't have ruled it out, but it's interesting to think of what could have been. As for Penny, once Shaq left, that's when his career started to go downhill. And I would say it was not because Shaq left that cost it. It's just that he started to get bad luck with the injuries. Just his knee got blown out. And once his knee got blown out, he was never a superstar player again. He had a few seasons where he was a pretty good player, but not a superstar anymore. But he just never could get that mojo back. And that derailed him, in my eyes, from having a Hall of Fame career. Now, just based on just his achievements in his NBA career, I can see how some people could argue he's a Hall of Famer. If you look at it, he made 4 NBA All-Star teams. He had 2 All-NBA first teams in 95, 96, which is insane. So you can definitely argue it. You'll have guys who are less talented than him get into the Hall of Fame. They have been guys, cough, role players who don't deserve to be there. Draymond Green could possibly get in later on, who I don't think definitely doesn't deserve to be a Hall of Famer, but they'll try to push him in there. And Penny was so much more talented than Draymond. And even though his career wasn't as long as Draymond's, I would say he was still more successful when you look at just what he achieved. But But you'll see guys who don't deserve to get in there who are role players. I still don't think they deserve to be there. But I got to agree on my own metrics, not on the talentless players that have gotten to the Hall of Fame who didn't deserve to be there, but just what do I feel and just how do I rate it is that I don't think he deserves to be in the Hall of Fame, Penny. Unfortunately, his career just wasn't long enough. If he didn't get the injuries, he would have been a Hall of Famer. There's no doubt he would have been a Hall of Famer, but just I gotta be fair and objective about it. Just based on just his longevity, he's just not a Hall of Famer. Unfortunately, yeah, he's close, but it's just he's off just because he doesn't have the longevity. It's unfortunate, but that's what I would say.